All right. Can everyone hear me? Can I get a yes? Woo! All right. What a great set of days. Thank you, everyone. Very excited to begin. As was previously mentioned, I'm a bit of a fraud here, and I'll explain that statement at the end. But some paperwork, some housekeeping. I've been trying to speak slower in my presentations and also have been trying to drink more water because water is good for you and it's important to stay hydrated. So, yeah, thanks. Please give me that kind of positive reinforcement often because I'm a very sad, nervous person. And we'll practice right here. Just yell hydrate if I don't drink every 3 slides. Or if it's been 2 slides, but thank you. Good counting. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. I'm so proud of you all. Can I get a round of applause for you? You're in the audience? Oh, Jesus. Love you. Much appreciated. The question I'm going to be trying to answer for you in between gulps of water is, why do experienced devs still make big mistakes? I've been professionally involved with a whole bunch of software projects, and in most of them, they were crewed by a large set of experienced developers, people who really know what they're doing, people with combined decades often of project experience. Yet most of these projects suffered from at least one annoyingly obvious mishap, like a delay or a buggy release or something bad on launch. How does that keep happening? And to explore this, I'm going to use a framework called Fivewise. Show of whoops. Who here has used or heard of Fivewise before? Awesome. Thank you. That's most of the room. The crux of Fivewise for the rest of us is keep asking why arbitrarily around 5 times whenever you get to a problem. Thanks. 3 slides. I think it's been 2. I'm upset you think that I'm a problem, but I appreciate your enthusiasm. It was originally developed by Sakichi Toyota, pardon if the mispronunciation. For Toyota, the corporation now is one of the big proponents, and it's really useful when you're trying to diagnose a technical outage or retro some sort of failure in processes. And I would posit it's particularly useful when those processes are people. There is always an underlying problem in a system when people have failed. One of the big things around Fivewise is if someone breaks something, ask what system didn't prevent them that should have. So how do we set up systems to prevent big mistakes? I'm getting more serious now because this is what the talk is really about, not water. For the sake of this presentation, let's consider how to be a theoretical or preemptive why. I'm going to pull on stories from my almost decade, very excited about that, year of experience, years in contract work, internships, consulting, full-time work. And the narrative I'll present to you, although it seems unified and cohesive, is anonymized, obfuscated, and aggregated from those years of experience across different styles of work. Every mistake and lesson learned may seem obvious in retrospect, but that's because when you think about something a lot because it's important, it will seem obvious to you. And all these things happened in real life, give or take. Our first situation, very exciting, was me joining a team that was about to release a major refactor. This was my theoretical first software dev thing. I was very excited about it. I was in awe of all the great software people around me, designers, developers, PMs, whatever. It's been 3 slides, by the way. So you can imagine my disappointment, my dismay when the refactor was immediately rolled back for having a disastrous, like humorously large amount of bug stuff on release. Which brings us to our first very unfortunate situation, the situation of a buggy release. Show of hands, who here has released buggy code before? I appreciate the honesty. Everyone who has worked in any development team, 2 hands up in the front, thank you. I'm doing it right now. That's all of you. Why was the release so buggy? Why did these developers who should have known better release buggy code? We'll dive into that. Hydrate, thank you. Lesson 1, test. Again, many of these may seem obvious, but that's surface level. We should all test our code, right? Show of hands, who's written a test before? Most of us. Surprisingly few. Just kidding. Edge cases, major flows, regressions, these are all things that should be covered by your tests. Lesson learned test. But again, why? Why didn't the team test their code? Specifically, why didn't they test before release? Turns out the team did write some unit tests, maybe even a little attempt at an end-to-end test here or there. And they had scheduled to write those tests, but the team ended up punting them before release. They decided they'll do it in the weeks after. And then, of course, the thing is super duper buggy, and then the user is upset, and then we all hate everything. So lesson learned, manual verification is not an adequate testing strategy pre-release. It is not an adequate testing strategy for any non-trivial change, for most trivial changes even. A comprehensive unit test, up through end-to-end test situation is the real way to test your code. But again, the team knew this. These are seasoned developers. One of them had even written a book on testing. I feel like I was in the bad prequel to the book or something. Why didn't the team thoroughly write tests before? Well, nothing stopped them from punting. The team was in a rush, and they needed to release because some deadline was put on them, more on that later, and they just took all the uncompleted things that didn't technically block release and shoved them to after. Which is a lesson learned. Know what things are P0. I call it P0 or priority 0, the things that happen at array index 0, but really -1, P-1, before you release, if the release is array index 0. So why didn't this get done before release? Well, nothing stopped them. They shouldn't have punted the P0s, but they did. And one great solution to this that I think was mentioned at least once or twice today and yesterday is release checklists. Have a list of steps that you must go through before doing something such as a release. I personally recommend at least 4 things for any major software release, especially if users are affected by it. And users can include developers and or internal folks. Writing those end-to-end tests, your tests. Running a bug bash as a team, not just one person in a corner. Accessibility testing for any UI or other touches folks changes by someone who is an accessibility expert, not just your one developer who knows what it means to be colorblind, although that is very useful and important. And then fixing blocking and important issues discovered by either of those styles of bug bashing. And for more on this, I highly recommend the book, The Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande. It's a fantastic read on how and why to use release checklists in everything from aviation to doctors through software. Hydrate. Love you. Thank you. I will release you from the hydration thing. I'm already halfway through my water. All right. So for the next big project, we learned from our mistakes. We grew as a team. We included a developer very excited about and proficient in testing, not the one who wrote the book. That person quit because we didn't test before release, but someone else who was very into testing. And we gave them complete freedom, complete autonomy in setting up the tests however much they wanted. Thus, we arrive at the second bad situation. We put everything on this person. This was the only person writing tests, the only person documenting tests. Just kidding, they didn't. And even worse, the person got hit by a bus. Now, for those who are not seeing what that buzzword means, there's a concept of bus factor. How many people would have to be hit by a bus or otherwise taken out of commission on your team for you to lose critical, important knowledge? And if you have, the answer is 1. If you have one person that would need to be taken out to lose knowledge, that person is a bus person. Bless you. Why was our expertise concentrated in one person? Why were we in a situation where one person getting hit by a bus crushed our ability to thoroughly test our code? Because even worse, if you can imagine, than the huge personal, physical, emotional pain suffered by that person, we had another buggy release. Our app is very important. Well, first of all, you should bucket time for knowledge sharing. If you have a bus person, stop that from continuing. Make sure that they are given time to talk to people. For example, what I'm doing now, internally, conferences. Now, a lot of the time, people don't want to be the bus person. I personally don't like it when there's a literal line around my office pre-pandemic or a queue post-pandemic in my Zoom of people asking me questions that other folks, in theory, should be able to also answer. So how do we make sure that developers have time for knowledge sharing? even if they are under severe deadlines, under a rush. They have a million things on their plates. I recommend schedule one-on-one pairings, and I do mean schedule. It is good for developers to opt into one-on-ones. They get a question over Slack, Teams, email, etc., and they choose to one-on-one. But also put time in their calendars for it. As managers, you/we all have the ability to put blocks of time, 3 hours on a Thursday morning. Do whatever you want, especially if it's a one-on-one, if it's a pairing. One caveat, though. One-on-ones are a concentrated form of knowledge sharing. So as great as it is for people to set up bi-weekly one-on-ones or team office hours that can become those, etc., it doesn't really scale to large teams if you're trying to distribute a lot of info quickly. So show of hands, who here has done a one-on-one that was meant to be a pairing before? Almost no, very few. Cool. Put your hands down. Who here has done a mob programming session? More people have done mobs. I've never seen this before. That's so cool. Thank you. Mob programming is like a one-on-one, but with a bunch of developers all at once. It comes from the concept, yes, of a mob with pitchforks, but it can also be done over Zoom, on a computer terminal, etc. They allow a lot of participants to go through whatever it is, releasing code, reviewing a PR, writing a feature, diving into architecture, all at once. And they can be a little challenging to run. So I'd recommend, if you're interested in this, find someone who ideally has mob programming experience, or failing that, just has experience doing a lot of one-on-ones, and let them lead a group of people through an exploration, such as, let's say, releasing a feature or writing that feature. The most potent mob programmings I've been in have been led by people who are just pretty good at one-on-ones and wanted to do it more. Now, one-on-ones and mobs are great, but they have a flaw most or all of the time on your teams, which is they are transient, temporary experiences. They are not permanent. Even if they're recorded, it's not a permanency native medium. It's not intended to be permanent. So, as was mentioned a lot today, write docs. Good docs are important. Any sort of knowledge-sharing resource, like a recorded video of a walkthrough, a team presentation, an actual markdown file. Love Docusaurus, by the way. These are all great ways to share knowledge that can be permanent, that can be used repeatedly over time on the team. Even if your team is in a hurry, you've got management breathing down your necks, more on that later. It's a really good idea to schedule time for your documentation. Still, I have been on teams that actively practice all sorts of knowledge sharing, that write docs, that do one-on-ones and mobs, that spend so much time on their docs and their knowledge sharing that it feels like they only ever knowledge share, and no new knowledge is ever created because they're doing that all the time. And that might be because some architectures are just really time-consuming to describe. Some things are complex concepts, and you want to avoid those whenever possible. I highly recommend simpler architectures to the point where anyone who is a developer on your, I love how many people are nodding, thank you. Anyone on your team can understand it. Consider the makeup of your team when you're developing the architectures. Does it have people who are super duper contextualized expert in your area and no one who is perhaps a junior in your area, a junior in general? Probably not. Consider the range of personal experience levels. Are they someone who's been in software for a while? Are they just coming in? Are they someone who has no idea what your app does? They are a transfer, they're really interested, etc. Even better, involve team members across the gamut of your company, personal backgrounds, professional backgrounds, and so on, in the development of your major new architectures when they come around. Especially for folks who aren't as familiar with new arcs in general. That's my catchy shortening for architecture. I don't know if it'll catch on. For people who aren't familiar with your app, involve them. See how long it takes to explain your concepts to them. If you're explaining something repeatedly, if it takes 2 hours every time someone new joins the team, maybe don't do that. I got my friend Ian Craig from Australia. He works at a company called Slip. He's very embarrassed that I'm mentioning him, to draw me a diagram. This is why he's embarrassed. As code complexity goes up, people get sadder. As developer skill goes up, the code complexity rewrite goes up until we realize that people are sad. And the really experienced developers, the great architects, in my opinion, write the simplest architectures, the stuff that gets the most done with the least complexity. He's also embarrassed that I'm putting his face there. If you're watching this, hi, Ian. One final ding on this. Stop trying to make monads happen. Who here knows what a monad is? I'm getting booed. I'm excited I'm getting booed. Thank you. Monads are beautiful. I am not dissing monads. They're a wonderful concept, an incredibly beautiful concept that's very common in super duper, super functional programming paradigms. They're incredibly important. If your team is working on a highly functional app with a highly functional code base, monads can be a wonderfully expressive code pattern. But by show of hands, how many people have ever actually used and understood monads in a team that also used and understood them? A few hands. Okay, that's right, a few jubilant people, and almost nobody, because I even put this exact reaction in my slide notes because I knew almost no one would successfully have a story about them. For non-essential software patterns such as monads, meaning you can get your app done without them, just perhaps arguably not as well done, unless your team contains multiple developers who are highly experienced in that pattern and can explain it to the new people, don't do it, please, for everyone's sake. But okay. Woo! Water, thanks. I've been slacking. More on that later. For our next big project, we learned from our mistakes. We tested. We grew as a team. We made sure to include both senior and junior developers on a core architectural rewrite. Very exciting. That senior had never worked with juniors, so we were pumped for that senior to get experience with that. So this person who never worked with juniors before was now being told to do a major important thing in a hurry with juniors. What could possibly go wrong? Jerk. That's what went wrong. The lead developer blatantly ignored the very excited junior devs' ideas and went with their own crusty, out-of-date architecture opinions from, and this part is true, the 90s. We've advanced as an industry since then. Some ideas stay good, some don't. Product productivity plummeted. People were unhappy. Multiple people left the team. Very miserable. And I will also take an aside. I've been throwing around terms like junior and senior. Those terms are ill-defined. I don't intend to attach any meaning to them. I've seen people who've been working on software for 5 years who call themselves a junior, people who are working on software for 3 years who call themselves a senior, which is something I did. Please don't put weight into those terms. Another best practice to respect is whatever the thing you're working on says is the best practice. And I mean respect. I don't mean follow, necessarily, although sometimes that happens. The most immediate technical concern to me about this project as I'm describing is that the senior whatever lead didn't follow, didn't respect either the best practices from the framework they were working in. You should be humble and listen when there are best practices. You should listen to the people around you saying, hey, the framework suggests doing this. Because oftentimes, libraries, frameworks, platforms put a lot of thought into their best practices. And you might have something that goes against them, but you should still understand the reasoning behind the best practices should you choose to do something wacky and different. Disagreements are critical to vetting systems. If everyone seems to agree with the choice, find someone to play devil's advocate. In this case, people did disagree, but they weren't listened to. And not listening to is another way of saying learning didn't happen, which I hate. Prioritize learning. Learning is important. Another great reason why you want to disagree, you want to come collaboratively to a good architecture is because it gives people the opportunity to work with each other, to work with someone who has different ranges of experience, and to learn from them and to teach them. It's great. Oftentimes, learning again gets dropped because teams are in a hurry, but if possible, prioritize learning, even schedule it, such as in your one-on-ones. In this case, things got kind of bad, and I would say that we needed to involve management. Now, involving management is not a first step most of the time. If someone is blatantly being misogynistic or some other horrible-istic, then definitely involve management and HR if you need. In many cases, most cases, it's that they're under pressure, they had a bad day, they're unhappy as a person, something else. So talk to them, and then if you need, involve management and or HR. HR, I don't know if that term is everywhere, human resources, the people team. And I highly recommend the book Radical Candor by Kim Scott. If you're not accustomed to giving or receiving feedback, if you're getting a lot of feedback and don't know why or how it's being given, if you want to give more feedback and finding it hard, great book. It's geared towards managers primarily, but I read it as a non-manager and think it has a lot of great info for everyone. Yay, this book. Woo! Thanks. A little sub-lesson here, also make sure that your feedback and collaboration is happening cross-team. You don't want devs committing to things without consulting the PMs to make sure we're not adding too much to the schedule. You want to make sure the PMs aren't putting too much on the schedule, that the devs are like, oh my god, we could never do that. Cross-functional, good. But okay. For our next big project, we learned from our mistakes. We grew as a team. We removed the senior developers altogether because we didn't want to have any jerk seniors. No jerks, no seniors, only juniors. Thank you for laughing. I was worried no one would laugh at that and think, oh yeah, that sounds good. No, you need some level of experience, ideally, when doing something. Nothing beats real experience. Nothing beats real experience. I forget how many times already, it's been 2 or 3, someone has given an analogy about how you can watch, say, I think someone like Serena Williams play, but until you've practiced, you're not actually a tennis player. Why didn't throwing our devs directly into an experience-giving situation help them grow, though? Because, you know, we were giving them experience. Because you need to give them support. First-timers need support. And it doesn't matter if you've been coding for 30 years, longer than I've been alive. It doesn't matter if you've been coding for 30 seconds. You need someone there with you to help you out if you're doing something the first time. Now, that help out could just be in the form of docs, but most of the time, the ideal is mentorship, pairing, growth. Yay. I recommend a rule of 3. And this isn't always possible, and sometimes it's not the best strategy, but consider this for many things. Just observe first. Have the person who's new to the thing observe and even participate in a passive role, the thing. If you're, say, setting up a new project, a new refactor, have the person be assigned tickets, but don't let them or don't have them set up those tickets themselves. Then have them pair for the next iteration of that thing. Maybe don't lead the meetings, but be in the room when the architecture is discussed and the tickets are filed. And then the third time, let them lead the thing with a pair who is previously experienced in that thing. By doing this, you allow them to ease into the role, first seeing how it's meant to work, even learning the good and the bad from the person before them, then doing it themselves. Now, I realize this is asking a lot. I'm a very needy, greedy person, which is why I keep asking you for positive reinforcement. The thing you might be thinking is, well, my seniors are too busy leading projects for all this mentoring. And I say you're wrong. Your seniors are too busy doing projects is a bad thing. You need to reverse those priorities. Underload your seniors. Don't overload them. Don't fill your seniors' times with projects and then give them time for mentoring. Give your seniors the amount of mentoring that they would like, which is hopefully a lot, and then fill the rest of the time with projects. I realize that that is a large statement and isn't always completely doable, but to me it's the ideal. Because you should consider it a medium to long-term investment. In the short term, you might need to get stuff out the door and thus can't have a lot of time spent on pairing and mobbing and whatever. But long term, the more you grow your team, the more you teach them, the more effective you will be. So it is imperative to find that balance. It's imperative to find that balance for your seniors on an individual level and for your teams on a mass level. And I actually want to ask another question. Who here frequently, more than average, more than half the time, releases code and features on time? Almost no one. I asked it confusingly so no one would raise their hand. And also because I thought that would be the answer. Nobody. High confidence. We don't release things on time because we overload our teams. We commit to 10 units of work per 10 units of work, assuming that we are robots and that we will never have personal or professional tragedies, that buses don't exist and no one will be hit by them or equivalent. You should assume your team will underdeliver. Don't tell them that they're underdelivering, of course, but assume that there will be some flexibility in what they're able to create. Life happens, the world is collapsing around us, under-ask and overcompensate. And a huge part of that is underload your OKRs, or objectives and key results. Teams always commit to the moon because it pleases management, and that's not great. If you ask your department to strive for a level of success that is unrealistic, you are guaranteeing burnout and inflated expectations that are then not met. Now, I realize also different phrases mean different things to different people, groups, contexts, regions, but I have never had a positive relationship with the phrase aggressive goals. To me, aggressive goals means leadership has committed to stuff because they don't have faith in the team, they think what we're doing is not good enough, and when we don't hit those aggressive goals, they're going to reorganize the team, and that's not good. So I recommend the book Slack by Tom DeMarco. I don't know if anyone catch the pun. It's a great book on things that you can do to make sure you're underloaded rather than overloaded, and why that's really important. Almost done with the talk and the water. Cool. Last situation. We learned from our mistakes. We grew as a team. We tested our code. The person who wrote the book helped us. We knowledge shared, we paired, we mobbed, we programmed, we scheduled. We did all those good things. And you know what? We shipped on time. Who here has shipped a project successfully? Woo! That's such a good feeling. Yes! Yay! Lesson 1, celebrate your successes. This is a good thing. We should all be happy. We should all be happy when something goes right. We should be happy because we wanted the thing in the first place, I would hope. That's why we're doing it. We should be happy because it means people's paychecks are going to be bigger. And we should be happy because it means the team is operating in effective ways. It's functional. It's doing what it's meant to do. Something was done well for the team. And because this is LeadDev, that means it's our, good that did good. And you want people to know that. You want to share blog posts internally, newsletters. I like that idea. You want to praise team members in their one-on-ones and in their performance reviews. If you don't do that, you will give the people who work with and or for you the impression that it doesn't matter. If you don't celebrate someone's wins, it's like the win never existed, perhaps monetarily or just in their mind. So make sure that people are recognized when it comes to their pay, when it comes to the way you phrase things, when it comes to the amount of energy you put into expressing to the rest of the team, org, company, etc. But this is a Fivewise talk, so why? Why is that all important? Well, first of all, you want to quantify your benefits. And this might be the first thing that's in any way specific to refactors and rearchitectures. It's important to understand why the thing did good for your team. So if at all possible, measure it. Here is a set of slides from a talk I gave. This was at Codecademy. We switched our front end incrementally from Ruby on Rails plus a custom Webpack build to Next.js. Shout out Next.js. And on the left here is the amount of work for the smallest possible complexity, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 files. And on the right is the results with a currently not playing GIF of, does anyone which show is this from? Does anyone recognize it? Whose line is it anyway? Thank you. Yes, good. Great show. Great for PowerPoints. And also quantify your penalties. Know why things are bad so that you can justify fixing them. The 5 files would take developers, I'm going to throw a number out, it's wrong, 38% more time to work with, caused 12% more bugs, and 72.25% more developer frustration. So, being able to say those very impressive sounding numbers to management is good. And actually do quantify. And it's hard to quantify. I'm not going to get into how to do it. Look at the number of bugs caused. Look at the amount of developers complaining on Slack, that type of stuff. But still, many teams, despite quantifying their potential benefits and actual realized drawbacks, don't have time for this stuff. So try to find ways to do incremental victories. That thing that I showed with the Wayne Brady, the whose line whatevers, that was an incremental change. We converted one page first, and it was like a test page, and I think the second page was like our About Us section, which no one ever read. Go incremental at first. It's crucial that you can get the thing proven first and in production to demonstrate value and to make sure that if you get taken off the project unexpectedly, your code will live on. And the way you do that is with incremental refactors. Now, I'm not going to go deep into this because I don't think it's the right context, and I have 1 minute and 25 seconds left. But I'll give you 3 strategies before finishing up about how you can do incremental refactors, code changes that touch as little code as possible to create the expected benefits before we finish. The first is just don't touch everything. If you have a refactor, a change that can be applied to any number of pages, start with 1, and then 2, and then 3. Keep them side by side. You may also want to wrap the new, meaning you want to change both the implementation and the API, maybe keep the old API and swap out the internals for the new. That's a possibility. Or wrap the old, where you update the UI or the API, but not the actual internals. And to work with legacy code effectively, I recommend the book, Working Effectively with Legacy Code by Michael C. Feathers. Great book, great book. And we've, by the way, come full circle because this book starts with an explanation of why tests are important. Fine. We're done. Thank you for listening to me. Dad, don't clap yet, Dad. 23 seconds, I'm going to make the most of it. I'm a full-time open source maintainer, and I'm a fraud, as I mentioned, because I haven't worked at a company in 8 months. I work on static analysis tooling around JavaScript and TypeScript, so thanks LeadDev for taking a real big risk on me. I also wrote a book, as was mentioned, Learning TypeScript, which I would recommend you buy if you want to learn TypeScript. And you can sponsor me to work on your TypeScript dev experience on github.com/sponsors/Joshua K. Goldberg, which is my Twitter handle and website. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Ian for letting me embarrass you. And thank you to LeadDev for having me. This is great.